Hello everyone and welcome to round 4 of iRacing's Skip Barber series from Hockenheim. I really like this track and I was really looking forward to coming here until, that is, I found out that we weren't on the full GP layout. Instead, today we're racing the short A circuit, which is an entirely different proposition. And my qualifying performance reflected my disappointment. I managed to invalidate both my laps, so I wasn't able to post a time, and as a result we're going to be starting at the back of the grid. So yeah, it's all about damage limitation for me this race. It's a very short circuit and it's a short race too. We're only doing 15 laps around here and prime overtaking spots are few and far between. We're 15th out of 18 on the grid, so it's going to be a really tough ask. And straight away off the line we can see the car in front, Marcus Valley, taking it very cautiously on the approach to T1, perhaps a bit too cautiously. I was planning on tucking in behind him, but when I realised how easy he was taking it, I decided it was safe enough to pull out and grab the inside line. And then we see a huge cloud of smoke which alerts us to another danger at this sharp right-hander. We saw one car out in the barrier and another one on the left there rejoining, but thankfully we've got the power to get past him. We've gained 2 more positions. It's really tricky through this short circuit section, particularly on cold tyres, and that's what caught me out in qualifying. I've done quite a bit of practice getting to learn the new layout, and on warm tyres there's a lot of grip and you can really throw the car around there, but on cold tyres it's a completely different story, so we've got to take it very easy on these first few laps. We're now into the stadium section for the first time and it just seems like things might be starting to settle down a bit. I've got Marcus Valley about half a second behind me and Koji at Sonomiya about 0.5 of a second ahead, but the field's not as bunched together as I thought it would be at this stage. There's a bit more space than I was anticipating. And as we exit the final turn, I get a much better drive out of the corner than Koji ahead of me. But Koji switches to the defensive line. I've got no choice but to stay on the outside, and I know I'm not going to get around there, so I just ease off the gas a little bit and try and position myself for a faster exit, and we get it! Helped by Koji hitting the curb and getting all out of shape, and straight away there's a huge cloud of smoke ahead of me which suggests that someone else has gone wide, and I think it might have even been 2 cars. And if it was, I think that will put us into the top 10. So let's go back and check out a replay at the start and we can see how we gained so many positions over the first lap and a quarter. Now I'm right at the back of this shot, so instead we're going to focus on the red car, the number 18 of Nikolai Shoujenka. It was Nikolai who got into all sorts of trouble at turn 2, and we can see why here. He's trailing James Sears in the green and white car, and he just outbrakes himself, runs into the back of Sears, takes Sears out, just manages to avoid running it into the tyre wall and gets it back onto the track, and now we'll see me entering the shot. There I am, alongside Shoujenka with enough power to take it around the outside and grab the position. And then at the start of lap 2 we had to try and find a way around Koji at Sonomiya, and although there was no room at turn 1, we got a much better exit than the car in front, and that gave us the speed to tuck it up the inside. Meanwhile we see another huge cloud of smoke in front of us, and it looks like 2 cars have been involved in an almost identical incident to the one we saw on the first lap. And this time it's the number 4 car of Michael Steiner who brakes too late, and he runs right into the rear of that early 90s Benetton-inspired car driven by Miguel Sebastian, who tries to rejoin, but regretfully the car is just too badly damaged. Halfway through lap 2 then, and I get a gentle reminder that my tyres aren't quite up to temperature yet. I turn right to rejoin the GP circuit and I just lose all grip. The car slides out wide, but thankfully we managed to get it turned before we hit the concrete wall. However, it looks like some drivers ahead might not have been so lucky as we enter the main part of the stadium section. The yellow flags are out, so what's gone on ahead? At this point it's difficult to see, but it looks like several cars are involved, so I'm just easing off the gas in case I need to take avoided action. Luckily I don't need to, but we've gained a position. There was 1 car that had spun out. So as we exit the final turn to complete lap 2, all eyes are on the relative board. What position are we in? Because I've completely lost track with all the cars that have crashed out. And yeah, there it is. We've gone from 15th to 8th. We've gained 7 positions and we're about to gain another one. Jeez, there are cars perishing left, right and centre here. And all the while, the 2 most cautious drivers on the grid when the lights went green, that was myself and Marcus Valley behind me, we're still standing. And we're now up to 7th and 8th positions respectively. However, in all the excitement of being on the fringes of a top 6 battle all of a sudden, I get another timely reminder that my tyres aren't quite up to temperature. This time it bites me harder and I run wide, take out a few cones. Thankfully I didn't give away any instant points, but it did let Fally jump through and take that 7th position. So let's go back and check out a replay to see what happened in the stadium section on the previous lap, and it was all caused by this spin from Drew Smith. Now, he does really well to jam on the brakes and stop running across the track, but then he decides to try and rejoin right in front of the oncoming traffic, and look, cars everywhere having to take avoiding action, and it gets really messy. It's actually quite incredible that more cars didn't crash out, but you can see there the number 15, Phil Kane, was the unlucky one. Let's jump on board with the number 8, James Keane Brown. Now, it's not just an excuse to look at that gorgeous Martini livery. It'll also give us a good indication of the type of avoiding action he had to take. And yeah, there's Smith trying to get back on the track. And Keane Brown's only option was to run it onto the grass, and he does incredibly well to save it there. These Skip Barber cars are notoriously difficult to drive the moment you get off the tarmac. But spare a thought for Phil Kane in the white car and all of this. He came off by far the worst. Not only did he have to avoid Smith, but then he had to try and avoid Keane Brown as well. And actually it was a nudge from behind that sealed his fate. Yeah, that tap came from Craig Gilmartin, and we're riding on board with him now, and he gets right off the gas here as Kane makes that first swerve, but then he gets back on it, gets too close and gives himself no time to react when Kane tries to avoid Keane Brown. Meanwhile, the driver who first spun to cause all that chaos, Drew Smith, was the one who lost it again in T1 of the next lap. He's just having a look up the inside here, but there's not quite room. He asks too much of the tyres and loses the rear. We're rejoining the live action as we enter the stadium section for lap 4, and as you can see, we're right on Marcus Fally's tail here. Now, I know I've got a little bit more pace than him, but I also know it's incredibly tough to try and find a way around on this short circuit. There's so few passing opportunities, and I know that the only reason that Fally got past me was because I made that mistake on lap 2 when my tyres weren't up to temperature. So really, I'm going to be relying on him making a similar mistake, I think, because I don't know where I'm going to get around him. So with that in mind, let's fast forward to lap 7, because I spent the next few laps right on Fally's tail, but no opportunities arose. There just wasn't a gap. However, while the distance to Fally stayed consistent at around 0.5, 0.6 per second, you will notice that we're reeling in Craig Gilmartin in 6th. Back on lap 4, he had about a 2.5 second advantage over us, but we've been chipping away at him, and as you can see now, that gap is down to 1.4 seconds as we start the 8th lap. Now, the other thing to take notice of is the lap times. Just look down to the bottom right of the screen. Our last lap was a 1:11.1. That's about a second and a half faster than what we were aiming to do in qualifying on cold tyres. It just goes to show that once you get those tyres up to temperature, there's a lot more grip to be had, and it makes a huge difference to the lap times. And you can also see how much more confidence it gives me through this section. We've got right back on to Fally's tail again, and we're really pushing the car a lot harder now. I do brake a little bit earlier here because I've come to the conclusion that Fally's not quite as strong through that section. So I don't want to get too close, risk braking a bit too late and hitting his rear. But yeah, as we charge back in front of the grandstand, we're really close to him now. It's just 0.3 of a second the gap, and we're really applying the pressure as we come through the stadium section. Gilmartin's 1.3 seconds ahead now, but I suspect he's got one eye on his rear view mirror. He's probably seen that the two cars behind him are getting closer and closer with every turn, so he's probably hoping that we start battling each other, because that'll give him a chance to pull away a bit. We've just done a lap time of 1:11.5, so that's about 4/10 slower than the previous lap, and that's probably down to being a bit closer to Fally and being a bit more cautious on the brakes. And as we enter this turn, we see a puff of smoke. It's Gilmartin who's feeling the pressure now. He's run it wide, broke a little bit too late, went in too hot. That's given the chance for Fally to get all over him. They're side by side as we charge down the short circuit section. There's no room for me to get involved, so I've just got to sit back and watch these two battle. But it looks like Fally's had the same idea. He's thought better of it, but we've lost Gilmartin anyway. Gilmartin obviously feeling the pressure, seeing Fally and I closing in, and he's made 2 mistakes on 2 successive corners, and it was that second mistake that's lost him 2 positions. Fally up to 6th, I'm up to 7th. Here's the replay, and we can see Gilmartin lock up the brakes as he runs it in too deep. It sends him out wide, and that allows Valley to get alongside him. They're side by side as they charge down this section of the track. I'm tucking in behind. I've got nowhere to go. I can't get past, so I've just got to watch. Valley sensibly backs out of being up the inside into this tight turn, but yeah, watch Gilmartin loses the rear even before he's entered the turn. He manages to save it, but not before losing both positions. And he drops from 6th to 8th. Back to the live action now, and you'll have just heard Crew Chief tell us that there's 5 laps remaining, and I'm trying everything I can to try and get past Valley here, but no matter what I try, I just can't create an opportunity. Look how hard I'm pushing it into that right-hander as we join the short circuit section. It's 0.2 of a second now, the gap. We're as close as we're ever going to be, but there's just no room to find a way through. And as I said before, he's a little bit slower than me through this section, so I've got to be very careful on the brakes. I don't want to ram him, and in fact we get really close there. That's as close as we can possibly get without making contact. But we're just trying to get on the gas as quickly as possible to keep that pressure on him. Maybe, just maybe, we can force him into making a mistake, but he hasn't made one yet. He's drove an immaculate race. He's kept it so smooth. And this is the section of the track where he's a little bit stronger than I am. He tends to carry a bit more speed through these final 2 turns, but I'm going to do everything I can to stick with him this time. I've probably made my best effort yet at those 2 turns, and we are still right on his tail. 0.3 is the gap, but it's still not enough. We're not close enough to get alongside him and try and move into T1. So instead, we've just got to hope that he maybe runs a bit wide on exit and goes out over the curb. But no, he doesn't do that either. He's tied it off perfectly. So we're struggling here. We're trying everything we can to keep with him. He locks up the brakes a little bit there, but it doesn't seem to affect his apex. He's got a good X out of the turn, and still we're struggling to find a way through. And that was pretty much the story of the final few laps of this race. No matter how hard I tried, I just couldn't create that opening I needed. I was never more than 0.3, 0.4 of a second away from the rear of Valley's car, but it was to no avail. Had we been racing on the full GP layout, it might have been a different story. We would have had that long sweeping parabolica and that fast approach to the hairpin, which is a great overtaking spot, particularly in these cars. But instead, on this short A circuit, it was really hard work. There's just no room to make a move, and you can see how close I was. So let's rejoin the live cockpit view with 2 laps to go and see if there's anything at all I can do to salvage this 6th place. So we've just done a 1:11.2. Now that's one of our faster laps, but it doesn't seem to be making a difference. If anything, it looks like Valley is pulling the pin because he's opening up that advantage now, and it's 0.5 of a second. That forces me to push even harder, and look, I pay the price. I just run it in a little bit too hot into that right-hander, and that gives Valley the momentum he needs to open up that advantage to 1 second. For the first time in this race, he's got some breathing room. Well, with only 2 laps to go, I had no choice. I had to push. I wanted to give myself every opportunity to stick with Valley and just be on his tail in case he makes a mistake. I must admit that with every turn, it's looking less and less likely that he's going to make an error. And we've just got the notice there from Crew Chief that the white flag is coming out. So we're going to have 1 lap to go. It's now or never. If we're going to be able to make a move, we need to be closer than this. 0.7 is the gap. So we have gained a few tenths back since that mistake on the previous lap, but it's not close enough at the moment. Out of the final turn, and that gap's 0.6 now, so it is coming down. Slowly but surely, it's absolutely imperative that we take turn 1 as smoothly as possible here. We don't want to lose any speed. On the gas as quickly as possible. We've done it okay. It's still 0.6 the gap, so we haven't gained. We don't want to brake late this time. It's important to take this turn correctly. A bit too much curb on the inside, but it hasn't affected us. We're still 0.6 behind, and we're now approaching the part of the track that I know I'm quicker than Valley. So if ever there's a chance to get back on his tail, this is it. Here we go. Can we brake as late as possible, but keep control? Yeah, we've done it. So we are right back on his tail now. It's 0.4 of a second. We're still not close enough to be able to think about making a move, but all we can hope for is that he makes a mistake through this stadium section. He's hit the first apex okay, he's got on the gas, we're right on his tail. Still 0.4 of a second. There's 2 corners to go, these 2 right-handers, and he's usually pretty good here. And in fact, it's me who loses a bit of grip in that penultimate turn, so with that, my hopes of 6th place evaporate, and we cross the line in 7th. But I certainly can't grumble with a plus 20 iRating boost after starting at the back of the grid, and no incident points either, so our safety rating is up to 3.71. But ultimately, it was this mistake that cost me the chance of 6th place. This is lap 3, and I just ask a little bit too much of my tyres before they're ready. It sends me out wide, I end up rearranging a few traffic cones, and it opens up the gap to let Fally through. And from then on, there was no way back for me, I just couldn't find a way through. So let's take a look at the classified results, and there we are, 7th place. And looking at the best lap times, I saved my best until last. That last lap was a 1:10.9. However, it was nowhere near the pace of the front 5. Look at those fastest laps up at the top end of the leaderboard. In particular, the winner, 1:09.6, was the fastest lap of the race. Impressive stuff. Next week we're going to Road Atlanta, so that should be a spectacular race in these Skip Barber cars. But in the meantime, if you've enjoyed watching the video, please do leave a like and consider subscribing to the channel. There's loads of videos up that you might want to check out. And yeah, give me a shout, let me know what you think. Cheers guys, enjoy your weekend of racing, good luck.